This is for the love in you. This is for the love.
Peace and light. This is your self-love advocate, Jai Pierre Raven, and this is another episode of the Love Right Now show. But it's a special episode because it's the one of 7 where I will actually have video recording where I sit down with women that I admire. And this new series is called Healing the Black Woman. And for this first episode, I'm joined by Eboni Harris. And we're going to get into Eboni and her story and the wonderful work she is doing. But just to give you a little background, if you're new to the Love Right Now show or if you're new to the video recordings, the first series was the self-love journeys of women that I follow and admire. And I sat down with those women and we dove into a very authentic conversation about their self-care regimens and their self-love path into their authentic self. And so now, since then, I've started a podcast called the Love Right Now show, and it's been all audio up until this point because this is a very important topic that I really wanted to bring in some amazing women as we just kind of address and really bring some awareness around the state of Black women, right? And so, as I do with every show, I like to recognize a person or a group of people who are self-love slaying in these streets. And that would be, without a doubt, Miss Eboni Harris.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
I'm so happy you're here.
I'm happy to be here.
So we got to dive into this shirt.
Oh, okay, yes. Self-care is sexy.
Yes, it is.
It's one of the shirts that we sell on Melanin and Mental Health. We are a group of therapists, well, 2 therapists, 2 brown chicks changing their face in therapy on both sides of the couch, and we focus on reducing the stigma related to mental health in Black and brown communities, as well as developing more clinicians of color to practice. And you can see therapists of color or clients of color on both sides of the couch. And so we like to promote through our social media, through our gear. So we have like dope therapists, therapy is dope, self-care is sexy. Because we want to start the conversation. And people often comment when we're wearing our shirts like, what is this about? What is that? And then really start the authentic conversation.
I love it. I would have worn my shirt if I knew you was wearing it. But Melanin and Mental Health, Eboni Harris is the co-founder along with my sister, Elisa Bouquin, who I interviewed for the last series. And if you are not following, please follow Melanin and Mental Health. And I just think that's a beautiful, fast-growing movement.
It is.
Congratulations on all of the success.
Yeah.
Because if you're successful, then our communities are successful.
Right. That is the goal.
Those resources are readily available, and I love that. And I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing.
Thank you.
And so that definitely, is why I feel like you're self-love slaying in these streets because to make therapy accessible and to kind of just, get rid of the stigma around going to a therapist, especially in Black and brown communities, right? And so I think that's amazing. And then when we drill down to the topic of healing the Black woman,
right?
How aligned is that?
Definitely. It definitely is, just based on what we know about how Black women are treated when it comes to their health, mental, medical, physical, whatever it is. It's important to have different platforms that are looking at how do we heal you, how do we open you up to different forms of healing, and make sure that you're taken care of when you do seek out that healing. And sometimes that's what happens. Like, we can always reduce the stigma. That's why we have the part about developing other therapists of color. Because it's really nice to tell people, talk about therapy, make it accessible, make it like, this is something I want to do. But then, okay, now I'm ready to go look for somebody, what next? And how do I know I'm going to be taken care of when I move into that space, right? Because you can always go to a therapist that isn't concerned about you as a woman, as a Black woman, and your experiences. Which sounds contradictory to therapy, but it happens.
It does, and I think it happens in all kinds of healthcare spaces,
exactly.
Which I feel is why Black women are not feeling like they're being heard in certain healthcare spaces. And it could be solely because they are Black, and it could be because the healthcare system isn't just set up to focus on the relational part of healthcare.
Right.
you know. And so with saying that, you have a very interesting segue into therapy yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You were in college, and you were doing well.
Mm-hmm.
You went to the San Francisco State University, eat 'em up, cats high. And it was a TV show that had you excited about therapy.
So when I was younger, I knew nothing about therapy, mental health, anything like that. That was not a discussion that was had within my family. Yeah. So I didn't know anything about it, but I definitely remember watching Frasier. Frasier was one of those shows that, I mean, and it's funny because looking back at it now, I feel like it would be one of those shows people are like, that's boring. Like, who would watch that? But I love Frasier, and I really got a small sense of what mental health was. Obviously, I had no clue what it actually was. I was just like, oh, he gets to talk to people for a living, and he's on the radio? Which, by the way, I do both. Or on my podcast, at least.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, he gets to do talk radio, and he does talk therapy, and that's all I knew. So I was like, okay, I'm a psychologist. That's what I decided when I was younger. I'm a psychologist. But when I went to undergrad, which was at Dillard in New Orleans, I was there my senior year, and Hurricane Katrina happened, and so we had to leave for 6 months. And when we came back, a lot of our teachers didn't come back with us. So that was my senior year. Those would have been my letters of recommendation, all that stuff. They didn't come back. And so I was like, oh, how do you get into a PhD program without people saying, she's awesome, she did a good job while she was in school? So I did it, and then I ended up coming home. My dad had been sick anyway my whole senior year. So I came home, moved back in with my parents, and got a job in Huntsville. Okay. And that's when it first was like, you should just apply for like the program at Sam Houston. Yeah. I was still being stubborn though, so I ended up going for my psychology. So I was like, I want to be a psychologist. That's what I'm gonna be. And so I went for my psychology, finished my master's, and it was like, what do you do with this? Nothing. So, so then another coworker was like, well, try the counseling program. Once you finish, you'll get licensed. You can have your own practice. You don't have to go back and get your PhD. You can wait to do that if you want to do it later, which I still had planned to do, not anymore. But yeah, so then I ended up going back to SAM. So I have 2 master's degrees from SAM, actually. One in psychology and one in community counseling.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
That's awesome. You know, I mean, because you do so much.
I do.
You know? But the thing about it is you're so good at it. So you're a therapist, yeah. But you're also, you do like PR support, web support.
I try. So my goal is to just do things that I enjoy. Mm-hmm. I've been really big on, especially at the point where I finished my internship hours, because that took a long time. It was a lot of work, and I was like, I only want to do things that I like. Or at least things that I find some type of excitement about. Okay. And so that is how the podcast got started. I have a podcast, Room for Relations.
Yes.
From the time of like MySpace, well, my high school was engineering high school. Okay. So if I had decided to become an engineer, I would have been a computer engineer because I really like coding.
I can totally see that.
But I decided to do therapy. And so I've always done like tinker with like HTML and CSS and C++ and all that stuff.
We don't know what you're talking about, but it's all
years. I've always kind of tinkered with that stuff. And so when it became time for me to start my own practice, when I was doing my supervision and things like that, she was like, oh, well, you know, you should probably have a website. Just go pick one of these free websites and build one. And I was like, I don't want to do that. So then I like did all my research, and it's probably because I just didn't even know too much about it. So I did all my research, and I was like, oh, I'll build a website from scratch. And so I did that. And
I just built a website from scratch.
Then I built my podcast website, and then when Millennial Mental Health started, we built that website. So it's just something I enjoy, and so I try to incorporate the things I enjoy into what I do, so I'm not getting burnt out. Because I am a person that probably would get bored pretty easily if I just did one thing 8 hours a day. So
but what a beautiful collaboration of your gifts.
Yes.
Because I'm sure that saves you a lot of, I don't know, time, but
not really time. Money.
Which is important too.
But time is something I do, you know, it's something I can do.
That you probably do it anyway.
Right, exactly. It's kind of like just sitting around, let me figure this out. I love figuring out things. I was a math and science person growing up. I mean, I don't know. I still went into therapy, but yeah, so it's something I like having a problem that I can like, it's a actual answer. Where sometimes therapy doesn't feel that way. Like it's a lot of work and flow, and you know, they get there when they can and things like that. Where it's good to be able to have something where it's like, okay, I know I can do this with a website. Yeah. I will research it for 2 hours. Once I get the answer, I'm like, yes, I knew it. And so it's a good balance.
But it is a good balance because though you're very technical, you still obviously have the discernment.
Yes.
right? To
skills.
not, because we've talked about this before, like it's not necessarily about fixing someone, but it's something different.
Right.
And so we're going to get into that. But there's a stigma in our communities about therapy. And I think for a lot of Black women, it's like it's not even an option, whether because you grew up with it not being an option or the right option, or you don't want to go telling folks all your business, and you know, or it's not an option maybe from a resource standpoint, or they don't know, you know, where they can go. So when you think about therapy as being part of the solution of the state of Black women's health, how do you go about tackling the stigma? First, did you experience stigma growing up around therapy? And then how do we tackle that as a community?
Right. Definitely, like I said before, mental health just wasn't discussed in my household or within my immediate or extended family. It just wasn't talked about. So it wasn't even like something where it was like, oh, this is a bad thing, or that you don't do it. It just wasn't talked about, you know?
That's very true. Like, literally, I didn't hear anything about therapy until I went to school.
Exactly. Like, in all honesty, like, it was just not, it was never like, oh, she's struggling, you know. I have family members that have very clear, like, mood swings. And I'm not saying, like, in the, like, oh, you just mad today. Like, extended periods of time whenever we're going through things. And it was never discussed, like, the type of help that person would get. It's kind of like, oh, that's just them, right?
Yeah.
And so I didn't feel like there was a stigma, but obviously I inherently learned that you just deal with stuff as it comes, which is a part of my personality now that I have to work on, because I'm really big. My friends always talk about, like, even when we talked about the podcast earlier, and we just been like, I'm tired. You know, I've been doing this podcast for 4 years, and my friends like, you didn't ask us to do nothing, though. You didn't ask us, like, we could have helped you, but that's because I have been taught that you just do stuff. And then when you burnt out of it, you just gotta move on to something else, you know, as opposed to, like, you can still enjoy it if you get help, if you get other people to kind of, you know, assist you in it. And so the same thing with your mental health. It doesn't have to be, I'm gonna take on as much as I can, take on as much pain as I can until I just can't anymore, and my body literally gives out, because that's what happens a lot of times.
And I hear that so often with women in general.
Specifically women, yes.
You know, just going and going and going and going until you literally are running on fumes.
Right.
And, you know, back in the day, to some degree, that was kind of the expectation.
Exactly.
And for a lot of us still today, like you were almost rewarded from being burnt out.
Right.
From your good.
Right.
From your good work.
It's a positive, we use it in such a positive way. Like, she's so strong, she's such a hard worker, and it's such like and it can feel like a source of pride. Like, I know, like, I had my supervisor, my therapy supervisor, and she's told this story, so I don't think she would care, but while she was getting her PhD, right, so she had a full career before, while she was getting her PhD, she had breast cancer, she had 2 kids in the house, and was working full-time somewhere, I don't remember where, and, like, this is just what you do as a woman, like, it's like, but you don't have to, like, it doesn't have to be that way, but we so often, that's just who we are taught we're supposed to be.
Yeah, that's very true. Who we are taught we're supposed to be. There's a conditioning, and that plays a part in our relationships, and it also can affect our health holistically. Just our spiritual health, our emotional health, carrying around that baggage and not feeling like a resource that is there, probably not knowing about it at all.
Right.
Or feeling like that's just not something we do.
Yeah, it's a lot of reasons. I don't like it's funny because we recently talked about, like, not necessarily liking the word stigma, because it's so many reasons why people don't get mental health care. Like, it's not just because, therapy is bad. That's part of it, right? That we just discussed that, but it's also the cost of therapy.
Not being accessible.
Not really knowing where to start to go to therapy. Some people don't even realize that their medical insurance a lot of times cover behavioral health. You know, they don't know that. The comfort level of going to a medical provider, that one thing we talk about a lot is the whole authority, and how people in authority tend to, especially in Black and brown lives, bring in other people of authority, right? So if I say something I'm not supposed to in a therapy session, now CPS is involved in my life, right? Now the police, or whatever the case may be. And so it's that mistrust of, like, these professionals that are supposed to help you. And so a lot of that also has to do with it. It's not just because, only white people go to therapy, or because only crazy people go to therapy. It's so many other factors that affect whether or not you seek the help.
Yeah, I totally agree with that for sure. So, okay, well, we'll be back. We're going to take a little break and talk about some of your first experiences in self-care and how you transitioned into womanhood.
Okay.
All right? Okay, we'll be back, guys. Welcome back to the Love Right Now show with Jai Pierre Raven. I'm here with Eboni Harris, and we're going to jump right back into our discussion. We are talking about the state of Black women's health as a part of the Healing the Black Woman series. And so, question for you. Who was the first person that taught you how to take care of yourself as a woman?
I don't know if there was anybody in particular, but thinking back on like different women in my life growing up, it was probably the women as a child. I would say they were mean.
Okay.
Like I think a lot about the people that like influenced me and outside of my direct family. So I was in a lot of like sisterhood organizations. I was in Girl Scouts. I was in an organization in high school called the Mademoiselles. And so a lot of the leaders in that were very strict on their boundaries, but I didn't have the language to even know what that was.
Okay.
So it felt like, oh, y'all were just being mean. But no, it was really about like, no, this is crossing my boundary, or I'm going to take care of myself, or something like that. And so as I got older and looked back, I would be like, oh, that makes sense that they did it that way, because as an adult that is responsible for these children, I have to do certain things to make sure I'm okay so that I can keep you safe.
Right.
And I didn't see it that way at all. So thinking back, I definitely think that was a good lesson as an adult, to be able to go back and say, that makes sense. And sometimes you do have to not make that person happy so you can take care of you, and then come back and then help that person as much as you can.
Yeah. That's an interesting way to reflect on that, because I know I definitely had some people in my life like that, like just straight up direct.
Yeah, like, no, I'm not doing that, or no, you cannot have that, or no, that's not an option. It's like, but why?
Right. Just like that. And, but then you still had this like respect for them.
Exactly. Exactly. Did not take away my respect, and I listened and I did what they told me to do. So definitely.
No, that's a very good point. And there's a population of Black women that do not or have not had those opportunities to be a part of those sister circles early on, and to have those kind of influences in their life. And I feel like that, because we're Black women, we are vulnerable to certain things. And I feel like the vulnerability broadens the less exposed that you were growing up, and when your foundation is not as sturdy. And so there is definitely, a spectrum, if you will, but I do feel it's still across the board something that we have a huge gap in, and so I've been thinking about that, like, who were the first people, to teach me how to take care of myself? And my experience is very much like yours. I watched my mom, but I was also in those spaces of organizations and things like that. But I don't know, I think it kind of went out the window for adolescence. I got amnesia. I don't know what happened, but I had to get back on the journey and get back together.
It took me a while to start taking care of myself, but I do realize that those probably were lessons that if I had been more aware, or maybe it's just that because I had a child like mine, I didn't see it, but now I'm like, oh, that was what they were doing. Yeah. But it took me a while to get there.
I'm still getting there.
Exactly. It's still a process.
So, how would you feel is the state of Black women's health in your view?
I'm always an optimistic person. It's getting better, right? We are taking more control. We are advocating for ourselves. And there are a lot of people that are working specifically for Black women. And so I think that helps, even if you can't access those particular resources, to know that they're out there and to make you feel more comfortable in seeking something that could be helpful for you. So I do think it's getting better. I think it's probably, like I said, since we are starting to advocate for ourselves a little bit more, it's kind of like you don't have a choice but to, right? Like, we're not getting
in your face.
Right. We're not giving you an option to like treat us however or dismiss us, and especially with statistics coming out about the way Black women are diagnosed or not diagnosed for certain things, and some of our concerns are just seen as complaining. I think that's giving women they're feeling more empowered to be able to speak up for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And what personal experiences might you have had feeling like, for whatever reason, in healthcare spaces you weren't being heard?
I definitely have had situations, and when I not recently, I guess it's been 2 years now, it's been a minute, but I saw a therapist. So I've been a therapist before. It was a decent experience, nothing major. I didn't feel like it was like the life-changing therapy I was looking for, especially becoming a therapist. I was like, I need to find a therapist that's gonna like change my whole life, because I want to be that for other people. But I did have some good experiences in therapy, and so my most recent time looking for a therapist, it was just not a good situation. Like I felt like she wasn't focused on me as a client. She wasn't focused on helping me. It felt very much like she was trying to make a new friend. And so I don't know that, and so I feel like because I'm a therapist, and I didn't tell her I was a therapist, I kept it to myself, but I was like giving her stuff like, well, it could be this, and these are some things we can explore, and like she was just like in her own world, like, girl, let me tell you about my life, and let me tell you what happened, and so that was definitely a space where I was just like, this feels very like uncomfortable, and it really scarred me as far as therapy, even as a therapist, like, and I know there are good therapists out there, but even after that, I was like, I don't want to do this anytime soon. Like, I need a break, just because it wasn't a good experience. So that was one. I feel like, that's probably the biggest one. I've had some other like small things, but nothing. That was like the biggest one where I was like, I'm not feeling this at all.
Oh, so that's an unfortunate feeling, but fortunately, you were a therapist, so you knew that you had options and you could go around.
Exactly.
And sometimes that's going to happen. You know what I mean? Even though there may already be some issues, reasons why you feel like therapy isn't an option for you, but then, that. So how would I know, or how would I go about choosing a good therapist for me?
I think it's important to, first off, see how they're willing to talk to you ahead of time, right? Sometimes, and it just depends. Different people have different models. This is just what works for me. In this situation, this didn't happen. So I do a 10-minute consultation. I do a free phone consultation where we can talk. What do you need? How can I help? Is this a good fit? I know 10 minutes doesn't sound like a lot, but we tend to get pretty deep in like letting you know what the first few sessions are going to look like. And that's not something I did. I called. It was an assistant that answered. I set up the appointment, and then the person I was actually thinking I was going to go see was not the person that showed up for the session. So that was a whole other thing. But so that's a big one. Is like asking those questions, like, well, who is my therapist? Because maybe it's a center and you don't realize it's a center. Who's my therapist? What are her specialties? And usually, if you can get on the phone with a therapist, that'll help, because you can see kind of how y'all ebb and flow as far as conversation. It's not the same as being face to face, of course. That's completely different. But you can at least kind of get a feel of the person and see if you feel comfortable with even having a conversation with them. A good therapist will probably have you want to spill your guts on the phone, and they have to be like, okay, wait, we're gonna hold this out for the session. But I also think that therapy is kind of like dating, like it's trial and error. So sometimes you may think you found somebody and you go 2 or 3 times and it's like, this is not a good fit. It's okay. It's okay to say like, hey. And I know I tell people this all the time when they struggle with it, but tell the therapist, like, hey, I'm not really knowing if this is a good fit. This is what I think I need. I don't know if I'm getting that. Again, a good therapist is going to say, okay, either this is how I can shift it to fit your needs, or I will give you 3 referrals so you can find somebody else that may be a good fit. If they're like trying to keep you there and trying to tell you why you're wrong about what you need, or trying to change what you think you need, then that's not the person for you. So therapy is with 80% the relationship, and so if you don't feel comfortable, then it's okay to move around.
That's very, very good advice, because it can be intimidating if you've never walked into those type of spaces, and so that's really good stuff. Thank you for sharing.
And it's always less scary when you know what to expect. So if you can say like, what is the first session like? If they say, well, you just come in and we just talk, or I have an assessment I do, or whatever, at least you know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So I've been hearing a lot of stories about women who felt like for whatever reason they weren't being heard in certain spaces. And you had mentioned it earlier, like my explaining to you what's going on with me are complaints, and you're telling me there's something else, and then also the misdiagnoses. I've been hearing that a lot too, and wasting a lot of time and resources, and almost to the brink of death, even.
Right.
So, and I feel that a lot of those reasons come from bias, and it can come from bias from Black providers or non-Black providers, sharing some of the same biases when it comes to treating Black folk, and specifically Black women. So what advice would you give healthcare providers in terms of addressing the bias in their practice?
So I know that a lot of healthcare providers do keep track of like clients' diagnoses. They have some type of a system to keep track of that stuff. So I would go in and even look at that, or make that a point to add that to your practice to see when you have a white woman or a Black woman or a Hispanic woman or whatever the case may be, what does that look like? Like, because maybe you don't recognize it when you're sitting there, but if you have the data, you can't deny data, right? So if my Black clients are they come in one time and I don't want to see them again, but my white clients have come back and I've been able to help them and move them and give them resources and things like that. Like, I think you can kind of pay attention to that. I also think it's everybody has bias, and sometimes people struggle. They want so bad to be like, I'm not biased, I don't see color, which is a problem. But they want so badly to be, I'm okay, I'm not like that. And just because you have bias does not mean you're racist. I have bias. I am a cisgender straight white woman, Black woman. Like, I have bias. I have things that I believe or things that like I might react to that maybe I don't need to. And so you have to be aware that everybody has it. It's not just you.
Right.
But when you say that to people, sometimes they feel like you're calling them a racist and they just freeze up. And it's like, I don't want to talk about it. So being open to the fact that everybody around you has bias and so do you. And so then being very aware of that when you're in a practice or when you're working with these clients. I think also making sure that you open your circle up to other people so that you can have more dialogue surrounding it.
Yeah.
So even if you're like in a consultation group or something like that, like who's in this group? Who are you talking to? And what are y'all talking about? And are there people of color, people of different sexual orientations or whatever the case may be in your group? And so that you can kind of check yourself when somebody else is in there. It's like, well, why did you give her this diagnosis but not the lady over there? Things like that. So I think those are some ways to try to.
Powerful ways, self-accountability, and I mean, I even used to have an issue with the word bias, and had to check myself, as I got more into this wellness work, and it's like, yeah, we do, we all have it. It's not allowing it to influence your decisions about somebody else's health.
Right.
So I think those are really good, words of wisdom. I appreciate you sharing that. And what advice would you give the woman who feels scared to go into therapy? I know you gave some really good points in making sure that the therapist is right for you, and I think that that's a really good way, just a 10-minute conversation prior to coming in, just to make sure that it feels right for you, because I know I can tell 5 minutes into a conversation if I'm going to continue to, what level of detail I'm going to give you.
Right. How comfortable am I talking about certain things, right?
Yeah, so I thought that was really good. And so what about for the woman that is just terrified to even make the call, for whatever reason? What advice would you give them?
I am a shy person, so I get it, but it really is just a conversation. Therapy is not, I think we have this idea of what it is, like from TV, from cartoons, from whatever, like you're laying on the couch and this person has a notebook and it's writing out everything you say. It's literally just a conversation. And there's so many modes of therapy and healing. And that's something we try to highlight. It's not like, although I am a talk therapist, I don't think this is the only way for you to get healing. I think there are so many options for you. Do I think it's helpful? Definitely, and I think in combination with other stuff, it's extremely helpful. But it's several ways for you to get healing. So just exploring it, taking opportunities to talk to other people that have been in your shoes, that have either saw therapy as beneficial or said, nope, it wasn't for me. Talk to both of those, because you have to understand it's not about convincing you to go to therapy. It's about what do you need help with and what steps are you taking to get that help. So whether that's therapy, whether that's working out, whether that's, adding yourself to some type of a sister circle situation, whatever you need to do, like what are you doing to get that help? And just understanding that you are the only person that's going to advocate for you, so you have to do it.
Love it. That's so true. We can do whatever we need to do for our self-care toolkit. And so I appreciate that. Yeah. So I've been talking to Eboni Harris. I admire you so much. Thank you. And your work empowers me personally. So we'll be back to talk about how you can stay in touch with Eboni, any special projects she may have coming up. And you are listening and viewing the Love Right Now show, and we'll be back in just a minute. Hello, I'm back, your self-love advocate, Jai Pierre Raven, and we are on the Love Right Now show. I've been talking to Eboni Harris, giving us some really, really good advice, really, really good support on approaching therapy, and then also considering the holistic benefits of exploring other healing modalities. And we talked about her personal experiences. I appreciate you sharing those. So how can we stay in touch with you?
Okay, so I have a lot. I'm trying to be quick.
And I'll have this.
Okay. I'm Eboni Harris, so you can follow me across social media at Eboni Harris MA. It's EBONI Harris MA. You can also follow Melanin and Mental Health at Melanin and Mental Health across all social media except Twitter is Melanin Health. And you can follow Room for Relations, which is my sex and relationship podcast. It's soon to be store thingamabob at roomforrelations.com and Room for Relations across social media except on Twitter where it doesn't have an S.
She is very technical, and you learned that. But we'll also have that written up in the description.
Yes.
And any new projects, events coming up?
Yeah. So I'm not sure when this is coming out, but I'm going to be speaking in LA at a conference on October 5th or 6th, one of those days. I'll be speaking in Chicago at a conference November 16th and 17th, the Go Get Her conference. I'm Melanin Mental Health. If you happen to be in private practice or are thinking about opening a business that is similar to private practice, I'll be hosting a private practice 101 webinar this month in October. And Room for Relations will be changing. We'll continue the podcast. It won't be as often, but we're also going to be having some more products that are focused on developing yourself as a desirable person, just in general, whether you want to be in a relationship or single, what can you do to develop yourself and take care of you and make sure that you are all you want to be so that whenever the love does come, you're ready for it.
I love it. Thank you, sis, for joining me. I can't wait to see all of the amazing things that you create. I know you're working on quite a few projects. I appreciate you being a part of this series. You have been viewing the Love Right Now show, and for those that are just listening in, you are listening to the Love Right Now show. I'm your self-love advocate, Jai Pierre Raven. This is a part of the series Healing the Black Woman, and I will see you next time. Peace and light.
This is for the love.